was the office manager of the Energy Assessments Division, where he led work on highly technical issues, including complex forecasting. Before joining the Energy Commission, he served in a variety of capacities at the Energy and Efficiency Institute at UC Davis, including as the Director of Research, where he directed the Institute's operations and research portfolio. He holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering and is pursuing his Ph.D. in Mechanical Engineering at UC Davis. While Siva isn't technically an egg student, he did all this before egg existed. He was some of the inspiration for us going after an energy-related program. Next, I'm going to introduce Zane McDonald. He's the lead energy transition analyst, hydrogen and alternative transportation at S&B Global Platts Analytics. As I think it was Ben mentioned, or Ali, he was also our first egg graduate. Zane joined S&P Global Platts in 2018 to research and model technology and policy scenarios critical to the energy transition. Zane's expertise contributes to several Platt analytics research topic areas, including cross-commodity hydrogen analytics, current trends and advancements in alternative transportation technologies, long-term transportation oil product demand, and environmental policy analysis. Prior to his current role, Zane was a part of the transportation team at the International Energy Agency. He received a BSc in chemistry from Marshall University and a master's in both energy systems and transportation technology and policy from UC Davis. Our third alum is Leticia Pineda. She's a researcher at the International Council on Clean Transportation. I also had the pleasure of working a bit with Letty while she was here at UC Davis. She's a researcher for the Latin America region, supporting technical and policy analysis within the green freight and heavy duty vehicle programs. Leticia has worked previously with ICCT as a consultant and fellow supporting work in Mexico on fuel economy, emission, and fuel quality standards and other local initiatives to improve air quality from the transport sector. Before joining ICCT, she worked for the Energy Efficiency Agency in Mexico on the first fuel economy standard for light-duty vehicles, and then transitioned to lead the Clean Fuels and Vehicles program at SEMDA, a local NGO. Leticia holds a MS in Transportation Technology and Policy and an MS in Energy Systems from UC Davis, as she said, inspired by a conversation with Zane. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our alums to talk to you about their experiences. And again, following that, there'll be a Q&A for students, and your peer, Meg, will be moderating that Q&A.
Thanks so much, Alissa. Do you have a particular order that you'd like us to go in?
No, we can go in the order of introduction if that's easiest. So Siva, Zane, and then Leticia.
Oh, great. I was going to hide behind Zane and Leticia a little bit, but looks like
Please
I'm going to
pass
start
the buck,
over.
Siva. This is more casual. You can certainly do that.
So I want to first, I think, start off by getting one thing off the table on this call, which is my PhD. Let's not talk about that. So it started and it's still going. But I think it's only kind of valuable to just start off by just being grateful for the people that got me to where I am right now. So just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to Ben. I think without Ben, where I am today is probably not possible. So, so Ben, thank you so much. Along with that, my thanks goes to Dr. Hargadon, who really helped me get on a path, and many others, but these two really stand out to me as people that really helped me get on a course. So I got my bachelor's in India. I grew up in a family that just told me to either be an engineer or a doctor. I was a little better at math than kind of biology and sciences. So I got into engineering and didn't really know what I was doing until I came to the US for my master's, up until I got to Utah State for my master's, to kind of just do what everybody did in India. I was just following the crowd and the crew on what needs to be done, one step after the other. So a master's was the first time I kind of really enjoyed digging into fundamental concepts, enjoying the idea of learning more than anything. So I kind of got an internship at General Electric right out of my master's to So my master's was in mechanical engineering, looking at aerodynamics, specifically wing design. So I got a internship at GE to kind of look at their turbine design, specifically the blades and wings and such. So I started there, was not really happy, didn't feel like I knew the fundamentals as much as I wanted to. So just, a specific day working, and I was like, oh, I want to go back to school again. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I applied for a second master's in mechanical, just wanted to go back to school, just be in school again. Got into UC Davis, and UC Davis called me and said, are you crazy? Why are you doing a second master's? You could get a PhD. So I started that, and PhD didn't really go well as I wanted. So had a lot of starts and stops. I think a lot of it was just pure kind of luck, I guess. I was kind of pursuing different areas of research that either got the funding got pulled out, or something else happened. So that's all kind of the bad story. So I'm going to start off in 2007's timeframe. So 2007, there was this fellowship at Energy Efficiency Center just started. There was this fellowship in business development through the business school, specifically aimed at grad students who would like to learn a little bit about entrepreneurship. That's how I met Ben and Dr. Hargadon, and basically applied for the business development. And as a part of that, that offered me a year-long, essentially an internship with the Energy Efficiency Center back then, helping commercialize technologies that are coming out of UC Davis, or broadly in early stages that could help with accelerating energy efficiency in the state, in the country, in the state, so on. So that was the hook for me looking into energy efficiency. But I think a real part of the learning there was just kind of understanding this huge valley of depth that we all talk about, the importance of making it through the valley of depth for the technologies, and really being a part of the solution and transformation of the market. So learning that was really, really helpful. And a second part of the Energy Efficiency Center's kind of help for me was understanding the context in which we are doing all this, right? So I just want to break it down here in kind of a high level, right? So ultimately, there is policy, right? There's a kind of a policy that we all want to get to. There's a policy ideation phase. We all have different frameworks that we study in school, but ultimately there is a policy that comes from either general public or there's something coming from intellectuals, whatever that might be. And then you kind of move the policy forward in terms of first assessing the feasibility, the benefits, and so on. And then you go into the implementation and planning phase, and then kind of looking at how it's doing. So for me, for a long time, it was hard for me to bridge the work we were doing between technology incubation and where the state and the country and so want to go in environmental policy or climate policy, right? I mean, you kind of can do this independently in silos, but kind of really bridging that gap between, oh, I am doing this particular technology incubation in the broader context of climate policy, and out of the different phases of policy, this is where it plugs in, and this is why it's important. And I think that context learning was the best part of being at the Energy Efficiency Center for me. So where in the entire landscape and the ecosystem do you belong, and how does what you do helps? So from there on, to join the Energy Commission. And at the Energy Commission, as Dr. Kendall mentioned, I started as an office manager looking at primarily the electricity demand forecast and the natural gas demand forecast. That was my core issue. Within the electricity and the natural gas forecast, we also had to forecast transportation and understand EV growth and such. And since then, I kind of took over as the division deputy. So I basically now report to the executive director. The Energy Commission is split into 6 divisions broadly. 3 of them are programmatic, and 3 of them are more policy oriented. So I'm one of the policy oriented divisions where we look at either assessing different policies that come down the pike or ideating policy ideas. So for example, the zero carbon policy SB 100 ideated in the division before it went to the governor. The governor kind of signed off the executive order. So that's what we do. And then so right now, the important thing that we're going through, taking into account what happened in 2020 summer, is summer reliability and reliability of the electricity system as a whole, and the natural gas transition. So we have these conflicting policy goals, or I should say, conflicting, bold, and incompatible policy goals that we have to bring into some sort of a cohesive narrative to make sure at the end we have clean, reliable, and affordable energy. So that's kind of like where my story is, and I'm happy and looking forward to the Q&A to talk more specifically. Thank you.
Alissa may be in childcare duty, so Zane, I'll formally pass the mic over to you.
Thank you so much, and I want to mirror Siva's comments that I'm really flattered to be here. It's an awesome opportunity to get to come back and talk to grad students. You know, I'm not too far out from being there myself, and so it's really I'm very flattered to have the opportunity to come back and have this conversation. So I joined ITS, pre-energy graduate group, in 2015 to get a master's in transportation technology and policy. And when I came to UC Davis, I really showed up into this transportation, this hub of intelligence on transportation with very little, if any, relevant experience on the topic. I had never taken a class in economics. I had never taken a class in engineering. I had never taken a class in planning or policy making. I'll never forget, I was on the ITS webpage, and I was looking through the bios of all the different faculty, and they listed some of their areas of expertise, and a lot of them said policy under their areas of expertise. And I'll never forget thinking, like, wow, this graduate group sure has a lot of politicians as faculty members. And it wasn't until like months down the line that I was talking with Dan Sperling, and I said something that evidently laid bare my ignorance of the difference, and he corrected me and said, hey, you know, policymakers and politicians are very different things. And I think this is generally a red thread for me throughout my time at Davis, was faculty and staff and friends and colleagues being very empathetic and being very kind and being very helpful, and kind of being there with me as I learned and as I grew. And it was really this helpfulness and this willingness to open up doors for me, kind of coupled with my general inability to say no at the time, that put me in a position where by my second year at Davis, I actually had a fairly wide breadth of research and academic experience. I had at the time participated in or contributed to academic research that spanned from looking at cycling adoption and the impact of cycling on GHG emissions, to power storage modeling, looked at hydrogen infrastructure and the role of natural gas infrastructure as a springboard for hydrogen, as well as looking at long-term transportation modeling. I had done a 6-month internship at the International Energy Agency on their transportation group, looking at long-term electric vehicle adoption around the world. And I had had a chance to present a lot of this academic research at different national and international conferences. And so it was really I had taken this breadth and not depth approach to my academics in those early years, and I enjoyed it. It was very valuable, and in retrospect, I don't regret it. But at the time, I was finishing up my master's in transportation technology and policy, and I didn't feel like I was done, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. Of all these different areas that were interesting to me, I didn't really know where I wanted to go, and so I did what any good student does in that situation. I punted and opted to try for a Ph.D. to kind of extend my tenure in academics. And my story is similar to Siva, where my Ph.D. really didn't go quite according to plan. I feel like in general in life, but particularly when you're in grad school, you're asked to make a lot of decisions that have very far-reaching impacts on your career and your career trajectory, with little, if any, ability to game out the long-term repercussions of those decisions. And at the end of 2017, I had just started my PhD in the energy graduate group, and I found myself kind of at one of these crossroads, or at one of these cruxes, when I was offered a job at S&P Global. So Standard & Poor's, or S&P Global, does they're a company that kind of lives at the nexus of data and financial institutions and technology. And the team that offered me a job was within their energy, commodities, and analytics group. And surprisingly, this Fortune 500 company that works around the world with all the big energy, oil, and gas firms had no in-house vision or in-house expertise on next generation transportation or any long-term alternative transportation modeling. And so they offered me a job to come in and build out the company's vision on alternative transportation and the role that alternative transportation will have in disrupting kind of the institutional energy markets. So this, again, you only have so much data to go on when you're kind of making these decisions. But for me, I was very interested in working for a big $140 billion company. You know, prior to starting at UC Davis, I was working at YOLOberry in Davis with a team of 5. And so being a part of something bigger, where I felt like my voice would carry more influence, was really interesting for me. And I also was excited of being able to take ownership and responsibility of something new. And to be perfectly honest, I was also very excited about the prospects of getting to live in New York City. And so, spoiler, I decided to leave my PhD and took the work that I had done toward the PhD to date and kind of parlayed that into a master's degree. And I joined S&P. I joined S&P, it's been nearly 3 years now. Within those first 2 years, we were able to build up a fairly robust alternative transportation product offering. And with that, we really analyze anything that comes down the pipe that might be considered disruptive, any technology or policy that might really change things up. And we try to assess what the impact that will have on larger energy markets and put that in the global context of how technology, how policy, how consumer behavior is shaping the energy markets within the transportation sphere. Now, most recently, within the past year, my role has changed. I have begun leading a new effort to try and build out a company-wide vision on hydrogen adoption. So now we're looking at really from all the way up the supply chain, from the supply of hydrogen through transportation of hydrogen, all the way up to the demand side of hydrogen, trying to understand what policies will build a market, what do we need to have a liquid, transparent, tradable market in hydrogen, and if we develop a liquid, transparent, tradable market in hydrogen that's robust, that looks like the natural gas markets of today, what could that mean for emissions, and what could that mean for achieving climate goals, and what kind of smart policy and regulation can help steer that market today in its early terms, in its early stages, so that when we get 10 years down the line, we have something that is healthy, something that is furthering climate goals, and something that enables access to clean energy. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't know if anybody heard, I doubt anybody really follows this outside of the small sphere, but my company just made a $44 billion acquisition of IHS Markit. And so if I come back next year, this story could be totally different. But with that, I'm looking forward to any questions that we might have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Zane. Letitia, I will pass the mic over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you. And I think this is a really good transition. So before my life in Davis, I did have a little bit of experience in like work related in terms of transportation and energy. My background is in industrial engineering, and my first jobs were kind of like not something that I was like really excited until I joined the National Energy Efficiency Agency in Mexico, and then I started working with various different projects, and I was in an area where we were just, collecting all the data and doing a lot of analysis, and I also was supporting the first fuel economy standard in Mexico. So that was kind of like great. And that's how I knew that I kind of wanted to work on something that was related to policy and have kind of like both technical skills, but at the same time working towards making that, something real and policy oriented. So that's when I worked, I was there for several years. And then at some point I was like, I feel like I don't have, the resources that I need to, continue my career here. So that's when I decided to look for a graduate program. And so I look everywhere and I came up, I mean, my options were always sort of like these joint programs, like very technical and policy, and so I did apply to two universities. One was Davis, uh, and the other one was Johns Hopkins actually. And I was looking into programs like energy policy and climate. They had one, environmental policy, transportation, air quality related. So I kind of wanted to continue on the path that I was, but also, try to like merge those, very technical skills with the policy side. So I visited both universities, and I have to say, I mean, when I visited Davis, I felt like that's where I belonged. I felt like everybody was just so welcoming, so smart, and it was a really good vibe when I was there. And I actually met with Alissa and Dan Sperling, and I don't know, I don't think she's there anymore, but Debney Meyer was one of the other people that I interviewed. So it was like a really good experience, just meeting everybody there. And I already had some uh, uh, sort of like details about the program in Davis at the time. Yeah, we didn't have the energy efficiency group, and so I applied for the TTP program. And a lot of the of my colleagues at ICCT are alumni from the TTP program. You may have heard about Ben Sharp or Nick Lutzi, Josh Miller. I think in the San Francisco office, there's probably half of us are ICCT. UC Davis, and the other half are probably Berkeley, like the other energy group. So there's always this fight. But I think, yeah, we're really happy with the skills that we took. And so when I applied to TTP, I was, trying to get that, grasp of the things that I was not able to get, on my undergrad. So it was, I even before we had the energy program by itself, I was also looking into some classes that were oriented into policy, and there were some electives that we actually were able to take. I mean, there was like an energy modeling class that was kind of new. There was an energy efficiency. So there were a few of them that I was kind of like very interested in. So I kind of chose my transportation, technology, and policy electives towards energy. Yeah, I'm the same generation as Zane. And so I felt like, 2017, I didn't feel like I was done. And so honestly, this was just a very casual and random, like, I think we were just talking at probably the student lab, and then he was just telling me about this idea. And then I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then that was it. But then, that's just like, it was something that kept, and I was like, you know what, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe that's something that I should also consider. And of course, I went to Anne Marie, who I think she's a great she's been a great person to talk to throughout like my whole years in Davis. So she, you know, she helped us, you know, to do that transition, and that's how I ended up on the energy group as well. But it was a really smooth transition because I felt like I was already working on several things. Like I was able, my focus at the TTP program was sort of like freight related, and I was able to work on, you know, zero emission trucks or working on some papers on the California Sustainable Freight Plan. So there was always, or TCO about, you know, different technologies and electrification of trucks. So there was always some component about energy. And so, yeah, that was a great transition. I'm really happy that happened. And my experience with ICCT, I mean, I've known them for a long time, and I kept working while I was a student, and so there was always sort of like a very close relationship with them. And right now, I'm really happy with the skills that I was able to get in the energy group, because I am now leading a lot of efforts in, especially in Latin America, and especially on heavy duty vehicles. But it, you know, it's a range of cost benefit analysis of different technologies, projects about low emission zones. Yesterday we had a great event about an electromobility project. We are working in 4 main cities in Latin America to bring e-buses, and so we're working, and I'm leading the Mexico City effort, and so we're sort of like doing a pilot with the electric bus and collecting data, and it's been just like a great experience. And we're, you know, dealing with all these challenges that, you know, we need to help the city and the operators. So it's great. I'm also working with some local fleets in Mexico to electrify sort of like last mile. So I totally feel like my, like I was able to get those skills and contacts and network that I needed. A lot of like my colleagues or people that I met through the program is people that I interact in my work. I mean, the International Energy Agency, or, you know, some other groups. I constantly, you know, see uh, faces that I've met through the group. So that was sort of like great. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much. I know as a student, we all really appreciate when alumni come back. It's frequently a favorite seminar event. And I also really appreciate that the 3 of you, I think, bring different perspectives, and that we've kind of got public policy, private sector, and kind of more nonprofit, but with similar approaches and the goal that we all share of saving the world, which I'm sure we'll all accomplish in our own way. So I definitely want to encourage everybody to ask any questions that you have, especially new students. I think this is a really great opportunity to learn from people who have walked this path before us. And we do have 47 people on the call, so I think we'll follow the usual format, which is that if you want to ask a question, feel free to use the raise hand function in the participants tab, and I'll keep an eye on that. And then also, if you have connectivity issues or don't want to be in the spot like that, feel free to ask questions in the chat as well, and I'll keep an eye on those. So with that, the floor is open. Okay. Let's see. Ben, do you want to start us off?
Oh yeah, I have tons of questions, but I don't want to hog anything. So I'll just start with one I think that all of you are involved with, which are, you know, is modeling, right? Like, you know, clearly that's kind of straight, like right in your kind of job right now, Siva, in terms of doing that for the state, and Zane, that's really important from an investment standpoint. And Leticia, same thing, right? This modeling is something that goes through. So I guess I wonder if students would be interested in what were some of the most valuable classes that you took, but also skills that you think you've, needed to develop and hone in your new, once you got out of school as well. I'm really interested in kind of this molecules versus electrons kind of question, and where you see, I mean, obviously, Zane, you're talking about hydrogen. So that's my, like, if I had a subject to talk about, it would be really interesting to talk about hydrogen. But I think the process of learning the skills in modeling might be also interesting to students. So
Ben, I'll take a first crack at that, and talk just. I'll peg my response to an experience that I recently had. So S&P owns just as a little bit of background. S&P owns a lot of energy commodity benchmarks. So Brent, JKM, which is the world's #1 traded LNG benchmark, and we have hundreds of thousands of these energy commodity benchmarks. And the way we make money off of them is when people trade energy commodities, they peg them to the price that we say every day that energy commodity costs, and we get, say, a 1/10 of a percentage point of the contract as reimbursement. And it became very apparent to our broader company that oil is plateauing now. There's a distinctly good chance that in 2019 we hit our peak oil. We're seeing coal trending down, and so some of these commodities, these energy commodities that we rely on, are going to be traded less in the future. And this writing was increasingly on the wall. And so, what are we going to do about that as a company? And the solution was start to look at other energy commodities and other benchmarks that we can make money on in the energy transition. And hydrogen was top of that list, as well as green methanol, green ammonia, guarantees of origin for things like green steel. And so the way a benchmark typically works is somebody calls up an oil trader and says, hey, how much did you pay for Brent today? And they make that call 10 times, and that's the price of Brent. They do a little bit of editorial magic, and that's the price of Brent that day. But with hydrogen, the world of hydrogen is all these very opaque bilateral trades with a dedicated producer of hydrogen whose hydrogen production unit is just sitting next door to that dedicated consumer. So it's a very opaque market, and there's no one that you can call up and ask these questions to. And so we had to have a solution. And the solution for that was modeling the price of hydrogen, modeling the production price of hydrogen. And the reason I bring this up is because I led the effort for developing our hydrogen production cost model. And the reality was, it was a very simple model that Chris Yang in steps helped me develop in 2015, just to understand the hydrogen supply chain. It was like a 101 sit down kind of thing. It was simple, it was elegant, it was concise, it was easy to understand, and now it's become the world's first hydrogen benchmark available publicly. And so it's the lesson that I gleaned from that was, sometimes when you're taking a modeling approach to a very complex solution, the additional bells and whistles are not always the most valuable thing. And sometimes an elegant, simple solution, sometimes you can turn to Excel and find the easiest modeling solution that you need. And that was something that I learned after grad school. I feel like within the academic bubble, I really enjoyed using R, and I really enjoyed using Python and tagging on as many additional things I could to get to that next level of granularity. But in a lot of ways, the simple solution can be the best solution and be the most elegant solution.
Yeah, I think I think Zane really set it up beautifully. So I'll kind of just try to turn it a little bit. There is just, I think the modeling, whatever modeling you decide to choose, and how complicated, how granular, whether it's temporally, geographically, whatever granularity you're looking to come up with, really depends on where on the trajectory that you're on, right? I mean, what is the question that you're trying to answer, and what is it that you're trying to influence? So I just want to take, for example, one specific market. So the resource adequacy. For those of you who follow the electricity market, there are three stages in kind of the procurement process of electricity any given year. So you have, first somebody has to say, this is going to be the demand next year. And then somebody has to say in real time, this is what's happening, and I have to run a market based on that, right? And before that, you also have this high level question on, whether you're looking at a year ahead or multi-year ahead, right? So let me kind of frame that in a kind of a high level context. So if I'm looking at whether the state has to go to a zero carbon goal in 2035 from 2045. Right now we have SB 100, which says all of the retail sales of electricity shall come from either renewable or zero carbon resources by 2045, right? So that means somebody has to tell me whether it's even remotely feasible before a legislature will say, yeah, we're going to vote on it, right? Let's make it the law of the land. So in order to do that, if you're going to make the perfect the enemy of the good, you will never help pass a law. So you basically have to have some level of high level, not say back of the envelope, but some level of like say, okay, this is how I'm going to frame this at a very high level. So now it comes into a year ahead situation, right? So 2045, yes, I can get there. But then in the year ahead, I have this demand, and I have to make sure I have enough procured energy for the next year to make sure the lights are on in the state. Now, the level of granularity and the rigor has to increase, right? Because now you're making real decisions based on the modeling. Before, it's a policy goal. You kind of push the policy, not necessarily understanding the realities of the world on any given day. And then when you plan for a year ahead context, so you're kind of saying, okay, I have 50,000 peak load next year. I'm going to make sure I procure the 50,000. But on any given day, now CAISO is in the market trying to run the market. So, and then they're making sure at any given instant, the load and the generation is matching. Now their modeling is completely different, right? So they're looking at machine learning, algorithms that can give them precision at a level to keep the frequency constant on the electric system. So I think it depends on where you are, and I think it's really important to have a toolbox of tools and your comfort on some sort of a modeling, whether it's Excel. I understand Excel is kind of old, whatever it is. You have other things coming on now, but Excel has a lot of cool features. You could do a lot of good policy analysis in Excel, but as you kind of come closer to the real-time impacts of something, you might have to do more. One thing I do want to make sure that I convey in this is, for those of you, regardless of where you're going to go and join, really become comfortable with data, right? So more and more, the decision making is becoming data oriented. And more big data oriented. So to the extent that you can if you can demystify what that data pipeline is, how do you gather data, how do you clean that data, whether you do it every day or not, just understanding how that whole thing is done. And then kind of, I think as analysts and as researchers and as leaders, in the future leaders, you will be actually presenting this information. So to the extent that you become really good at visualizing the data and being able to present the information, I think it would be really, really helpful.
And I'd like to also, I will probably focus, I was just going to make it the list, and I was also looking at the required courses because it's been a while, but yeah, definitely data is something that you should be comfortable working with, and it doesn't matter if it's Excel or Python or R or like whatever. You should feel comfortable to doing that, because that's something that we're all working with. So for sure, I remember that we had a data analysis class, so I think there's that. energy efficiency modeling. I took a class. I don't know if that's been offered as well. In my case, air quality was also something that was really great because right after I graduated, I was working on a very interesting project trying to bring different modelings, air quality models to just make the assessment of environmental benefits, but also like health benefits of, reducing emissions from, X and Y transportation policies. So yeah, I think you definitely learning programming language, R, Python, whatever. I think it's going to be super helpful. GIS is also something that I've been using a lot lately, and that can be, QGIS or any type of like software that you should be able to like do that. Let's see what others are important. Well, I think it's mandatory, the LCA class, but I think that's like one of my favorites, and that's been super helpful to me. Environmental economics, energy economics, those have been great, and I feel like at least in my daily work, I have to talk to different people, and they have different languages, so we should be able to understand each other and try to present the data in a way that everybody understands. And it's also my role and our role to from all these very complex modeling, or from these very long reports and very technical stuff, try to have like a good short presentation and compelling figures, charts, like great visualization, public speaking. I think that's really good to have for you to actually get that message out. I mean, I always like we always produce a lot of like very technical documents, but then nobody's actually reading those, and we have to do that job of like, okay, what is the most important thing that I want whoever policymaker to know or to take or to do. So I think that that's something to just keep in mind. Those reports are great, and it's great when you read them, and you can go through the methodology, whatever. But you should also be aware of like what's your main goal and outcome, what you want to achieve with that, and so you should work around that. And yeah, I guess that's my list of classes and suggestions.
Actually, just want to make sure I kind of close the loop on what just Letitia kind of talked about. Ben kind of asked, what are the classes, I've taken, after this. So, it was not directly in my career, but because of the business school I'm so glad I took a class in entrepreneurship and understanding how to approach, something like a business plan, right? Policy is kind of like business plan. You're trying to kind of sell something to people. So having an idea on how to sell an idea, whether it's coming from entrepreneurship or whatever it is, would be super, super useful. So I would say business development is one of the classes that I so am happy that I took. Another one is I just did a certification on Coursera on data. So, for those of you who take classes on Coursera, there's a couple of really good data specializations, specifically from Johns Hopkins, which I did a class on stats and econ after I left UC Davis in the last couple of years. And the last one is environmental policy and law. Just getting basic understanding of how environmental law is structured. So I think that those are if you're going to go into the policy world, there are so many wonky people that either talking law language or they're talking stats or econ. To the extent that you have peripheral knowledge of all that lingo, like Letitia was talking about, I think would really, really benefit you to succeed.
Great. That's all really helpful information for all of us, I think. And I also really fast want to make sure, in case new students are not aware, as a UC Davis student, you have access to software for free that is otherwise very expensive and requires a subscription. So if any of the softwares that Leticia or Zane or Siva just mentioned are interesting, I recommend just Googling the name of the software in UC Davis Library and seeing if we have it for free. And with that said, Tobiah had his hand up. So over to you, Tobiah.
Yeah, thank you all for the talk. It's like, it's great to hear, have you guys come back. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this more generally to all of you guys, but I think one concern I have is like second year, probably I'm just gonna get my master's, but I really want to like retain like kind of like this research focus. And I'm wondering if you can all speak on whether or not you feel like the position you're in right now satisfies, you know, an intellectual curiosity. And that's my best way of phrasing it generally. But
yeah, if you're okay, Letitia and Zane, I'll take this just from the CEC perspective. So I think it might be useful, Tobias, to just kind of think of broadly how CEC is structured, right? So that I could share with you how fulfilling it is. So so I think most state jobs generally, whether it's planning or regulatory, right, or compliance. So you have broadly three areas, right? You're developing the planning, you're kind of actually regulating, or you're making sure that something is compliant. Has broadly these categories of analyst, right, technical analyst, policy analyst, and management, right? So, and I wanted to draw the distinction. So technical kind of track is primarily develop the model, know Excel really well, know whatever, make sure the questions and the data processing is done. Policy analysis is more about, okay, you have a technical tool, and now let me, do a variety of scenarios on that to understand what is feasible and what is not, right? That's really what the difference of policy versus technical in my mind. So somebody who has technical depth becomes a really good policy analyst, if they have that, and then you have the management track. So if you kind of want to be intellectually curious, right, and continue to satisfy that space, from a CEC's perspective, if you're in the technical or the policy tracks, it's amazing, right? So one of the key areas that CEC right now is working on is, okay, this broad energy transformational questions, right? And then the energy transformational questions are, what should we do with our natural gas system, right? Should we keep the natural gas system or not? And how do you completely decarbonize the economy while ensuring reliability? And a lot of those questions are answered and underpinned by a lot of analysis, technical and policy analysis. So I think each of the institutions will always have the technical and policy analyst space, which would be very satisfying intellectually. And I think from a management standpoint, if you want to be able to take that technical and policy analysis and push towards actually happening, absolutely. I love my job. Right. This year was the most uncomfortable space because we had blackouts after 20 years in California. You do not want to be in a situation where the governor of the state calls you and just says, what the hell are you guys doing? But at the end of the day, what most people do not know is, we had the blackouts on the 14th and 15th of August. We could have had at least another 8 or 10. Right. And then those 8 or 10, working through that and then making sure it never happens again, right, is pretty satisfying. And then how do you take reliability and then combine that with these incredibly bold kind of goals? Let's ban ICE engines by 2035. Let's kind of have 40% reduction in building GHG emissions by 2030. Let's have a clean grid by 2045. Let's kind of move away from any new natural gas hookups. It's just crazy. But but at the same time, it's so so much of those answers are underpinned by this strong analytical staff, hundreds of staff at CEC, whose day in and day out job is to analyze these scenarios. And I think it's pretty satisfying.
So I would love to kind of build on that a little bit and talk outside of my talk outside of my direct role. I do find that my curiosity and my thirst to just become a crack researcher on something in 12 hours and then provide somebody a brief on it, I love that as well. And I also feel like I get to do that, but I don't think I'm unique in getting to do that. And I feel like as we see the energy transition start to blossom, all of those things that Sifa was just mentioning at the end of his answer, when we see ICE bands around the world, like really, I feel like we're seeing a new one each month at this point in major auto markets around the world. We see, I read just the other day, United Airlines is saying without carbon offsets that they can be net zero by 2050. We see IMO starting to target marine GHG emissions. We're seeing major players in Saudi Arabia's energy system saying that they want to begin to focus on low GHG energy resources. And so I say all these things to say that the entire world of energy, and in Letty's case, in my case, transportation, and in industrial, when you start to see green steel starting to flourish, the whole world of energy is rounding a corner right now. And everyone is trying to understand it. Everyone wants to know what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. And so I think broadly, the industry is hungry for people that are hungry to do research and hungry to try and learn and want to dig into technologies and dig into economic analyses of technologies and understand how they're going to work and why they work. And I think that is an aspect of work that's going to grow increasingly over the next 5 or 10 years as we all start to try and understand what the future energy system is going to look like.
And I'll just add lastly to that question that, yeah, no, it's true. We are, seeing all these really great changes in technologies and energy that we have to be creative. I mean, this is not something that we know and that we like, there are certain steps that we just need to follow and that's it. Like, we have to overcome challenges to decarbonize transportation, energy sectors. And so I feel like there's always, it's got like it every day, like I see, the need of, reaching out and maybe making some associations that maybe were not, as clear before, but, there's always, that need for curiosity and always, I feel like I'm really, I mean, ICCT has been a great place for me as well, but we all share kind of that same spirit. But it's also, like teamwork, and we like to work in teams. Like, we're not going to solve everything, by ourselves, but it's good to have, discussions with our colleagues and, different departments. Like, everybody's focusing on something, but then, when you just reach out to someone, at a different area or department or whatever, maybe, they have something that, could be interesting to explore. And we are also doing that. And so I feel like that should always be something that you should do as part of your career. And personally, like, I love, to do that. I feel like that's super helpful. But yeah, I feel like we're living in a world that requires all of this innovative and curiosity in us.
Just one more thought on this. We were talking about some of the free tools that are made available to you when you're a grad student, and kind of following on top of the idea of scratching that intellectual itch and that research itch is having access. You can just not take for granted having access to free academic literature. When you don't have access to like Science Direct free downloads of PDFs at will any longer, it really hurts.
Amen to that, Zane.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
I saw Reese has his hand up.
Yeah, I hope this isn't too similar to Tobias' question, but I guess mine is more around kind of scale of work. I think like, I guess I'll use an example in building decarbonization because that's mostly what I work in, but I see like, oh, we're gonna, try to electrify this many 100,000 homes in California in the next 10 years or whatever. And yet I can't help think about how hard it is to even just do one. So how do you kind of balance the, I don't know, almost the desire to kind of get your hands on like one decarbonization project or effort, and then still kind of comprehend how much of that needs to be done and how you can build policies around such complex and, I mean, you know, difficult things to do. I think I tend to get overwhelmed by it occasionally. So just wondering if you guys have any strategies on balancing kind of the scale of these issues.
Yeah, yeah, right. Thanks for that question. So, you know, specifically, first of all, thank you for working in building decarb. It's one of the hardest areas, and I'm so glad that smart and dedicated students are in that area still. So, I think from a scale, and I think there's a few things I want to touch on this one. So once something becomes a code or a standard, right? There you go, the scale, right? So as far as buildings go, the California Energy Commission, but also the state of California has such a kind of a bold, history of kind of pushing bold goals, right? So the 2022, the code cycle that's coming up, there's a huge push for all electric buildings. So once you kind of hit that, you're kind of looking at massive scale. So to me, from a policy standpoint, I think it's that the real kind of frustrating piece is between the time when you have an idea or the ideation of a policy goal, and then making it something that has teeth. And whether it's codes and standards or it's the law, the land, whatever that might be. And I think regulation has a very critical role in that, right? So I think markets are wonderful and markets solve a lot of issues. But there is a role of regulation when things are a little oblique from a market standpoint. So I am with you. I cannot get to the 45 goals sooner on the electric grid. There is a huge climate crisis that's happening, and we need to accelerate everything. But it's, to me, the biggest issues that I see are basically a consensus amongst stakeholders, which I really did not appreciate before. So you kind of want to accelerate the goals from 2045 to 2035. And it's absolutely awesome to do that from a climate perspective, from an EJ perspective, from a health perspective, equity perspective. And then you have this domino effect on the rates and reliability, right? And what do you do from a rates perspective? How do you plan that? So I think being a part of that broad stakeholder conversation more and more is helping me stay a little bit more moderate, for lack of a better word, in terms of the accelerated goals, but not losing the desire and passion for scale. And scale will happen when you have the right stakeholders pushing for it, when you have a communal consensus, and when you have the analysis that can show the benefits and really quantify that. And a lot of times that's the problem. People say, let's get rid of all the natural gas combustion power plants, right? Let's just get rid of them. Great. What's going to happen to reliability tomorrow morning? I have no idea. So how do you make sure that you have a solution that you really came up with, an option came up with, and the scale automatically happens?
So yeah, it's a really awesome question. And I think it's a really important question. And what I would add on top of Siva's comments would just be the idea of the importance of looking backwards and understanding how scale developed in disruptive technologies, in particular in disruptive technologies, so that you can look at the nascent changes, look at the niche changes that you see today, and understand how to develop them into scale. Understand what's the pathway to achieving scale, what's the pathway to looking at the 1% market share of electric vehicles today globally, and how do we get that up to 60% market share in 2040, and maybe understanding the early days of solar might help you understand what the early days of hydrogen might look like and how we can achieve scale. So I think the bottom line of what I'm trying to say here is that in the same way that it can be disheartening at how nascent some of these disruptive technologies are today, and some of these critical climate change technologies are today, there's a lot that we can learn about from looking at the development of other technologies to understand how to achieve scale in those, and really how to leverage them to get the impacts that we know we need. And it can always be really frustrating that I mean, like Siva said, we're in a climate emergency now, and so it can be very disheartening and very frustrating that things don't happen faster. But there's a lot that we can learn by looking at the development that we've seen historically in other trends and other technologies, and applying those today can help a lot.
And to finish with that question, I think, yeah, that this is a great question. I would also say that it's very, I don't know, I feel like sometimes, and we've encountered this, especially that I work in Latin America, sometimes you don't know how many times we've been in a position where someone, a politician, comes up with a number or a target or something that it's not necessarily like, doesn't necessarily have all, all the analysis that backs up that number. And so it's always the struggle of like, okay, how it's great that they're pushing, but sometimes, there's always that of like, okay, how are we going to do this? And so that happens in the real world many times. So there's always, something that you will encounter. And again, this is the world of like, this is politics and then policy. Sometimes you may have like really good comprehensive analytical documents and analysis assessments and whatever, and that's not enough to actually drive that change. And so I feel like that is very important what Siva mentioned about the stakeholder engagement. And I am in constant contact with usually when there's a policy, there's a stage of public consultation, and so that allows also to bring all these different aspects that it may not be very obvious at the beginning, but you have to think about all these different consequences of how you are changing something at a different level. It's going to impact the rest. So I feel like, yeah, we should all also put more attention in that stakeholder engagement and push for that, because that's also ultimately what's going to drive that change. But and yeah, you end up working with different models and try to use different tools to come up with something and justify and come up with a plan. But it's always a challenge, and but that's what we have to deal with. So so yeah.
Yeah, and in kind of like, I probably will sound cheesy here, but I will say it anyways. One of the hardest things I observe, over the last 3.5 years or so, is a complete lack of trust, right, between various interest groups. So each of you, as you kind of pursue, to your careers and be a part of, leading something, if you can embrace the idea of kind of the principles of respect, generosity, kindness, to build trust amongst the different stakeholders, that will move the table. That will move the needle so much. I mean, I see state agencies completely differing with each other just over turf issues, simple things, right? I mean, like, who gets to do this task versus that task? And there is this absolute siloed nature and a lack of trust. And to Letitia's point, that open public stakeholder process and where you could build trust among stakeholders will really accelerate the change that we want to. And each one of you, could be that light to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. That is very helpful.
Yeah, I think we're getting there's been a lot of really interesting insight on how things actually work, and maybe the numbers that are in policy targets are not only based on data analysis, or energy commodity prices are sometimes arranged through phone calls. So this is all really fascinating. I think we have 2 more people with their hands up, and that will probably be all that we have time for. But I think, Ali, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're still doing the lunch afterwards. And so if anybody, there's still room available in that, I believe, if anybody has lingering questions.
Meg, we actually decided to we could extend this to noon, but we're going to skip the lunch today since there was a lot of Q&A time. So we can go a little longer if everyone's okay with that, but we'll get to the questions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So in that case, I think we have Jean and then Daniel.
Thanks, Meg, and thanks to our panelists for coming to speak with us and hearing your experiences. It's very inspiring. And the conversation earlier on stakeholder engagement kind of prompted my question here. So what I observed from working in the electric sector prior to grad school is that kind of similar to what Siva experienced is that there's a lot of different perspectives, and it's really hard to build consensus, especially when we're experiencing disruptions, disruptive technologies in the space. So my question is that our program and like what we are trying to do when we enter the workforce and when we enter the industry is really trying to be that leading force for change and to really lead industry into a different direction. And how much of that change in trend do you see happening in the industry at the personal level? Like how encouraging it is to you to see more leaders thinking more about building consensus in the industry instead of saying, we will stick with natural gas technologies and not think about solar, not think about storage. So I'm trying to get a sense of what your experience has been seeing the next generation of leaders being more interdisciplinary, and how has that changed the workforce and your experience in the industry?
Yeah, Jean, thank you. Thank you for that question. And I think the honor is all ours to be here. I mean, I just feel so envious of each one of you that you're, kind of in school, kind of like doing these cool things, and I want to get back to school. And I think that's why I keep my PhD open. So, but to your kind of question, so the generation that's joining the workforce, I know, I think you probably saw a lot of surveys and stuff. There is nothing, more important than the newest, for the new generation than actually making change, right? Survey after survey shows that the generation that's joining the workforce right now is not motivated by money, not motivated by kind of influence. I mean, by kind of like what's not influence, success from a traditional standpoint. They're really looking for change. So I think, there's 2 things that, from a California specific, I want to comment on this. We in California, generally, no matter what the party line is and where you come from and what you believe, we believe in climate change here, right? So I think that helps a lot with consensus around policy. And I think the latest generation that's joining the workforce, to me, is one of the most diverse in thought, diverse in kind of goals and kind of acceptance. So I think from that standpoint, I think we're in an awesome phase, right? We have this highly motivated, generation looking for change, joining the workforce, coming with a broad consensus around, the state as a whole on climate change, right? And the importance of moving it. I think the important thing to keep on is, kind of goes back to Rise, right? Which kind of he talked about the potential disillusionment that you could face when you come in and you're trying to change and things don't move as fast. And I think it's important, to not lose kind of our kind of commitment to change, no matter how slow things might seem that they're changing. But overall, from where I stand, I think things are in a better place. I mean, at least over the last 3 years, there is a clear signal from both the citizenry of California, policymakers, and the industry, a commitment towards addressing climate change. The kind of barriers that I see is, what do you do with existing kind of investments, right? The stranded investments. I mean, let's just take natural gas for a second. The natural gas system, parts of it has another 30 to 60 years, right, of kind of of time that's required for them to be completely paid for. And you're still making investments in transmission lines, for example, in natural gas, to ensure reliability. How do you make sure that those investments that are happening are not damaging to that industry right now, and ensure that some way they are kind of compensated, whether it's hydrogen is the future, or whether it's the RNG is the future, or whatever it might be? I think that's what I see as the bottleneck. The bottleneck is, how do we take existing policies that we've already put in? For example, as I think I can speak here. This is recorded, right? but it'll be just with UC Davis, and it's going to be public. Ben?
It is usually accessible to the public. Yeah.
Okay,
but maybe Ali, should we stop recording for a moment? Or I don't know.
We can stop for a moment. And
Yeah, I want to touch back on the very beginning of your question. It is a really important question, and I'll start with just a little. My S&P's core consulting group deals with a lot of heritage incumbent fossil fuel companies, and so I think it really gets at your question. It's important to take your question, at least in part, not just from the leaders in California, but also from the perspective of kind of these global multinational energy companies that have a lot of money and have a lot to lose if they don't navigate the energy transition correctly. And one statistic that shocked me when I heard about it, that I think speaks a lot to what you're saying about the excitement and kind of the passion for change that we're seeing now that maybe wasn't relevant before. Across 2019, clients of our consulting service, most of the clients being kind of these traditional oil and gas companies, clients visited our energy transition offerings 400% more than they visited all of our intel on oil and gas markets. And so it is of high interest to these groups. I think there is a risk associated with using some of this passion around decarbonization for greenwashing. I was talking to a turbine manufacturer not long ago who's planning to install some CCGT turbines in Virginia, and they made them hydrogen compatible. And they didn't make them hydrogen compatible because they expected to transition them to burn hydrogen in the future, but because by providing a pathway to decarbonization, they were able to get financing and permitting to put more CCGT plants in Virginia. That would have been just there just wasn't the appetite to do it otherwise. And so this is just an anecdote, just a single anecdote, but it does show the potential to leverage this excitement in a way that is not well thought out, similar to Letty's point earlier, where you can have all the best ambitions, but if it's not thought out and implemented with the right regulatory framework and with the right targets, then it can actually feel like a lot of change is happening when less change is actually happening where the rubber actually meets the road.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I think in my experience, I do see great, like I can tell, the new generation has, a different perspective, and that's how's driving also the conversations with, the previous stakeholders, or I don't know, legacy companies or legacy technologies. There's something changing. And I also feel like even, this whole pandemic this year has made us more aware of, we're all in this together. We need to, make drastic changes to, the business as usual, and we need, to step up. So I think that's something that has like dramatically, changed the perspective that we had. There were things that we were not sure that we weren't gonna, move forward, but it's been just a very, very weird and interesting year also in that sense. But I have a lot of hope, and I'm really encouraged and motivated to, to keep working, and it's great, to listen to you guys about, what are your goals and your interests. And I think you're super valuable to we need you on this other side. And yeah, just don't stop being curious, don't stop being true to yourselves, and really like don't and never, because I think I have that before, and I think Anne-Marie has mentioned that, like, don't be discouraged to not apply to something, or don't be discouraged to not do something or pursue something. Really, like, you shouldn't be discouraged about that. Things happen in very funny ways, and I'm sure that your hard work is going to pay off. So just keep doing that.
Thank you all for your insights. That was really great.
That was very inspiring. I almost want to end on that note, but Daniel, I'm going to pass the mic over to you for your question.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I just had a quick follow-up question for Siva that I guess I would also like to open up to the whole panel. Siva, earlier you mentioned that decarbonization of built environment was one of the hardest areas in this space, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on why that is.
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. Thank you for that question. I take it that you're also kind of looking into building decarb, so thank you for being in that field. So I think there's so from a building decarbonization standpoint, like, historically, so the conversation has been energy centric, right? So, originally, like we talked about, okay, we should reduce the overall energy consumption of a building, and then, hence it translates to either grid reliability, less need for supply, and so and so. And the conversation then kind of moved to zero net energy, right? And then, we said zero net energy after a while, was proven to be extremely expensive to think about zero net energy buildings alone. And then now kind of we're moving into the broader conversation of decarbonizing the economy, and hence, decarbonizing the building sector itself as a whole, right? So I just want to put that in context first, right? And so now going into building decarbonization, let's kind of think about very, very high level, like the key foundational elements we have, right? So you have efficiency, whether that's coming through electric appliance efficiency or the natural gas appliance efficiency. And then you're looking at fuel substitution, whether that is electrifying buildings. So I'm kind of like loosely using these terms for the sake of the conversation. So either you're electrifying some of the natural gas appliances, or kind of changing the supply itself that's going in, using the existing infrastructure to RNG or hydrogen or so on, right? And then you have, the opportunity to put DERs on the location, and then you have opportunity to, potentially flex the load from the buildings, in kind of figuring out how you do that. So when you look at each of those major levers we have to kind of change. So efficiency, we've hit as much as we can on the electricity efficiency, right? So that's the low-hanging fruit. That's where we've been working on for a long, long time. And if you decide to do natural gas efficiency improvements, then you're going to have stranded appliances for another 10 years, right? So that needs natural gas. So when you think about continuing to use natural gas, you're basically saying, I want to retain the natural gas infrastructure, right? So you probably are aware of this, which is, we have, within the regulations in California that, we have to serve every customer who wants natural gas, right? So for the sake of one or two customers, you might have to keep an entire distribution network on. And what would that do to the entirety of the energy costs, right? For those who are the last customers. And then you have, on the other side, if you're going to electrify, electrification is not cheap. It's going to be super expensive for existing buildings. Electrification is much easier for new buildings, when they're happening. So what I kind of think about it is like, you have high capital costs, you have an entirety of the natural gas infrastructure to deal with, and what do you do and how do you repurpose it, right? And then you have, the issue of, where else do you have energy efficiency? And then if you're going to continue to electrify, then you're going to put a second peak on the grid in winter, right? Now you're going to move away from a summer alone peak load on the grid to now a dual peak also coming in winter because of heating the buildings. And what does that do to the supply side, right? So it's a pretty complicated one. And then when you put it in the context of, oh, let's double efficiency or 40% below by 2030, there are these conflicting goals that are hard to achieve in the broader decarbonization of the economy. And that's where my comment came from.
Siva, your answer just shows largely how integrated this entire sector really is and how integrated decarbonization has to be.
Okay. Yeah, I know within this group, Reese is working on electrifying multifamily homes, and Daniel is working on building design and sustainable materials. So lots of different approaches to this very important problem represented just in those two students. I think we're at noon and I don't see any more hands raised. So, oh wait, Ben, just kidding.
Yeah.
I do see multiple hands raised.
I have one quick one, and I'll let Siva, you can have the last word. But I did two things. One is I just posted a blatant plug for my class next quarter, so we can get more fantastic energy speakers coming in. Ali, I think, listed a few of them, which are awesome. So hopefully you'll consider signing up if you haven't taken it already. And so the code's there, but if you have to get approval, and anybody who's an ag, I'll approve, no problem. So you just got to go through that process. The other thing I'll say is, and Steve and I joke about this, you can only get, if we're trying to solve something, there's three levers and you only get to choose two, right? You can choose price, timing, and quality, right? And we're thinking about solving this climate crisis that we have. It's the same thing as doing any kind of, doing a renovation on your house. You really only get three, these three levers, you only get to choose two, right? It's price, quality, and timing. And this is an urgent crisis. So the timing is not negotiable. And we actually have to get these emissions down. So that's the quality. So the thing is, we're gonna have to pay for this. And I think the challenge that we're all faced with is how do we pay for it in the least amount and pay the least amount, but still get what we need, and also do it in the most equitable way. And it's really promising to know that the three of you are working in the world to try to achieve those goals. It's so gratifying to have you come back and to have you be ambassadors of the program. And so I want to thank you for coming today and for being able to continue to give back. And I hope we all take lessons in that when you graduate, that you'll do the same for us in the future. Pay it forward. Siva?
Yeah, so Ben, I think the closing marks for me, I think one, I wanted to put a plug for those of you hoping to stay in California. And with the broader, this COVID implications, a lot of the state government has moving to teleworking. So even if you're in Oregon, you could probably still work in California state. So I really, really encourage you to look at the state government as a place to go to. So the salaries are not bad. And for your generations, the salary doesn't even matter anyways. So they are, when you count the pension and all that, State government pays pretty well, and we are really in need of committed, passionate future leaders. And California has historically been, at the forefront. Not more than anything other than just who we are as a state and what we like to do. Be in the forefront. So I highly encourage each one of you to consider the state as a starting place. The second thing is, one of kind of an advice I got in the past was think of your professional kind of path as 3 cycles, right? A job, a career, and a calling. Job is something that pays the day, keeps your bills off. Career gives you a pension, and calling is where you're really satisfied. Don't give up on jobs and careers just waiting for your calling. Start somewhere, start showing your impact, and the calling will find you. And I just want to encourage you to get on the path of contributing to the society sooner than later, and not be disillusioned by all the politics and then the crap that we have to deal with every single day. And 3, I think this is my last point. UC Davis and the Energy Efficiency Institute and the people there are incredible. Some of the smartest, committed, kind, and generous people. And as I said, the smartness can take you only so long, so far. It all comes down to your passion, commitment, and general ability to be generous and kind to each other. And I think more than anything, UC Davis fosters that, a sense of kindness and generosity and a communal spirit. So I'm so proud of you for being there, and I'm so glad I was a part of it. And if any one of you want to reach out for just a conversation we can talk through, I would learn just as much from you as I could share with you. So with that, my favorite thing is Spock, so I have to do that.
You're channeling our chancellor. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, Zane and Leticia, do you guys have any other closing remarks?
Yeah, I can't follow that. That was also true, and also heartfelt. But yeah, absolutely humbled and flattered to get to chat with everybody. It was awesome. I also reflect the comment, if anybody wants to add me on LinkedIn or reach out. My UC Davis email address is still active, and I use it. Not super active on it, but shoot me an email. The whole thing, please do, and I'd be happy to chat with anybody.
And thank you so much as well. I'm really happy to seeing so many great faces, and I hope that you are all doing great. I definitely have to acknowledge all the support, help, kindness that I received from the group throughout. Like honestly, that totally made my decision easier when attending to UC Davis, and I haven't regretted at all. I feel like it's been just it's a really nice environment to develop, to grow in so many ways. And I would just encourage you to also reach out to your friends, colleagues, professors, everyone, if you are struggling with anything, either personal or professional or whatever. If you have a question you want to apply to something, like, just reach out. I feel like you have a great community, and I'm also really thankful and blessed to be part of that community. So yeah, if you want to reach out to me as well, my UC Davis email works as well. If not, my ICCT email works as well. You can also take a look at the open positions that we have here. And if you need to reach out to me, feel free to do that. And thank you so much, Ali, Ben, Alissa, everybody, Siva, Zane, so much. It was great seeing you, and thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm feeling very warm and fuzzy and inspired. So thank you all. Thank you everybody who had questions. Thank you, Ali and Alissa, for entrusting me with moderating authority today.
You did great. And thank you to our speakers. This is it's an amazing way to end. This is the last of our egg seminar series for the fall. It's a great way to end, and like Meg said, it's a great warm fuzzy way to kind of end the quarter, and as everyone heads off into finals and the holidays. So happy holidays to all of you, and great to see your faces and connect with you again. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thanks,
Cheers.
Meg. Thanks, Ben.
Bye. Bye, Zane.
Bye.
Bye.